Welcome to Armchair Expert, Experts on Expert. I'm Dan Rather, and I'm joined by Leslie Stahl.
And we're all brainwashed.
And we've been brainwashed. Our guest today is Rebecca Lemov. She's a historian of science at Harvard University, and her research explores data. I'm trying to change the way I say data.
Yeah, because
it's wrong.
Are you sure?
Yeah, every scientist we have says data because it's D-A-T-A. If it was data, it'd be two T's. Or even D-A-D-D-A. Data. Okay. Explores data, technology, and the history of human and behavioral sciences. She's written a bunch about a database of dreams.
You did it wrong.
What part did I do wrong?
Database.
Oh, database?
Yeah,
That doesn't sound right. Database of dreams. How reason almost lost its mind. World as Laboratory. Her new book, that's what we're here to talk about. It's very tasty. The Instability of Truth, Brainwashing, Mind Control, and Hyper-Persuasion.
This is wild. It's scary and it's good.
Yeah, it's very, very scary and very good. And I love the history of where all this stuff was kind of discovered and workshopped. It's dork.
Yeah, it's not, obviously some people stumbled in, but it's a lot of this is very calculated.
Yeah, they learned how to do this at a certain point.
Yeah, as you'll hear.
So please enjoy Rebecca Lemov.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
We had a guest this morning, and Dax was wearing that shirt, but it was inside out on accident.
Which Monica pointed out to me once we left.
Well, I didn't notice it till it was way too far in anyway.
Yeah, it really passed the point of no return.
What was really funny is I kept looking at your shirt, and I was like, it looks, one, I was like, I've never seen it. It's new.
Great, novel.
And two, I have a shirt very similar.
You do.
So I was like, oh, it looks like my Elizabeth and Jake. I think he's stretching it out.
It took a while.
She didn't recognize it.
Yeah.
You're back in California.
Yeah.
How often do you come?
Pretty often. Partly my husband's family lives here.
Did you guys meet in college?
We met afterwards, but in Oakland. So
Oakland.
Yeah, I was struggling to write my dissertation, and he was working at the cafe where I was struggling.
Meet cute. We call that a meet cute.
It really was. There was a mixtape involved.
Yes, and he was heavily tipped during the .com bubble.
Oh, right.
But then it collapsed, and then the tips dried up.
This is true. Yeah.
Oh, that's real?
Very true. It was a version of Cheers, but with coffee, where people would just come to gather around and chat with him.
Fun.
Just because he had that kind of air about him. But I was so involved in trying to write that I would sneak by and hide behind the jukebox.
You were playing hard to get.
You just had to wait for him to approach you.
It was unlikely we would ever meet, actually.
How did you?
I think I made a comment that I liked the music he was playing, which was
flattery.
On the jukebox?
Maybe it was through the jukebox. Yeah, Desmond Decker. And then he offered to make me a mixtape.
Whoa, hold on, that's a huge first swing.
Or a tape of this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it was a handmade tape, and then inside he wrote his number, but then he erased it and hoped that I would call him although it was non-existent.
Oh, like that you'd have to look and really...
Or take charcoal and tissue paper and
He's playing a game here.
This is
various
masterful.
detective methods, but instead, somehow we ended up meeting though he was going to give me a photography lesson.
Another great hack.
He's throwing a little bit at you.
Really
If he told you he's great at foot massage, you're like, okay.
It's actually true.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
I hadn't really thought about how cliche-ridden that story is, but yeah.
But that's the nature of love. It is all cliche. And then it feels very special and unique to you, and that's what's so sweet.
It is.
Yeah, it's really true.
So that means you guys have been together for 25 years?
Yeah, 25.
So embarrassingly, you were graduating from graduate school the same year I graduated from undergrad, but I imagine I'm older than you, so I think you must have boogied.
Maybe not.
I was born in 75.
I was born in 66.
In 66. Oh my God, you look incredible.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you do
I don't
look
know if you're
great.
supposed to comment on professors' looks,
I
but I
don't
guess
either,
you're
but I
human.
always like a compliment.
I accept a compliment under any conditions.
There you
but
go. Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
I was born in New York City, but grew up in Washington, D.C., or the outskirts.
Okay. And then now you're in Boston. So you've really done the tri-state.
And we lived in Seattle. Like, my daughter was born in Seattle. That's where I started teaching. That's where I actually taught my first class on brainwashing.
And then why Berkeley? Did you fancy yourself an antisocial misfit? Or was just they had the best program?
Well, after I graduated from college at Yale, everyone I knew seemed to be heading across the country. And we actually, I saw people I knew on I-80.
Oh, you did?
my
Other
God.
graduates?
Like midway through the country, others fleeing the East Coast. But when I tell students today, like, I make a joke about going to California to find myself, they don't know what I'm talking about. They're
Like
"Why
that
would-"
reference doesn't mean
It
anything?
doesn't mean anything.
Oh,
to them.
wow.
Like,
Oh, no. That's probably sad for us.
Yeah, that's why our population's declining and everyone else's is on the rise.
maybe you go to California to take a job in
Yeah.
tech or something.
Yeah, not to
Yeah.
go surfing and
Not
drop
to, like,
acid and get
learn
countercultural.
yoga. Yeah.
True.
But I was already living there, and then I applied to several graduate schools. Well, I got interested in anthropology because it was like a new thing.
How could you
Oh, right, we
not
share.
if
We
you-
share. I thought, why not just think of the most interesting thing you could study and the most interesting questions you could ask? And then I was like, surely it's anthropology. I originally went to study ethnobotany, which I thought of in a kind of Carlos Castaneda way.
Meaning were you going to like expand your mind kind of way?
Yes, but then ethnobotany, it turns out the way they were studying at UC Berkeley was highly technical, and it involved cognitive networks and taxonomies and things.
What's your story of why you were so drawn to brainwashing?
Well, it did happen during graduate school that I'd set myself, so I finally ended up studying more something like the history of the social sciences because I got interested in questions about why people do the things they do, or how free are we really, or to what extent people can be controlled. And that's kind of a cultural question.
Yeah.
Too. One of the reasons I got drawn to brainwashing is that we became enamored of this kind of French post-structural theory. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong with these writers, but just the way it was treated was a bit cultish, people waving the books around and trying to find this ultimate meaning, and it kind of transformed. I found it transformed the way I was writing, and I became very proud of like writing highly complicated things that nobody, just at the very edge of being understood.
Yeah. God,
And probably more often and not
It
understood.
was a trend. And then I would be kind of proud, like, oh,
Right.
that must
Oh,
mean
they
it's a
didn't
very
get
smart.
it.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I get it.
I'm not
This is
exactly the thing you're not supposed to say. And then I proudly showed this to a friend who is a journalist, and he said, I don't even, like, this doesn't sound like you. And I just remember that moment. Later, I thought, was there an element of something like brainwashing, even though it's very mild?
Or you fell under a romantic spell almost.
Yeah, it was kind of a spell.
I think that's the journey of finding your identity in some way, is you like
Yeah.
fall under the spell of these different things and then they stick or they don't.
You know, filed under youthful enthusiasm or just enthusiasm, which is kind of a good thing. And then the other part of it was I also fell into a kind of bad spell, addiction, and like an
my
abusive
kind of spell.
relationship.
Yeah.
wow, you guys share anthropology and
share
addiction. That's a lot of crossover.
Yeah,
We would have had so much fun.
indeed.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your flavor of addiction?
It was the hard drugs, opioids.
So
I kind of fell into this because I think I found myself in just a impossible situation, emotional situation, and a friend had shown me how to use this, and so I felt that it alleviated my emotional burden for some.
Yeah. It was relief.
It was such a relief, and I thought, well, this is just a great invention.
Yeah, right.
Incredible.
And especially opiates, they have the illusion of manageability because you can function. It's not like you're inebriated drunk and you can't do anything. You're like, you can kind of,
Pass through.
yeah.
And then I found someone who was a link to that or could purvey these things. So I fell into a relationship with him, and that compounded the whole situation. So that, it started off just weekends and kind of seemed manageable, but I wouldn't have used the word functional, but I probably thought that I was functional. But after a couple years, I lost friends and I lost touch with a lot of my family and has found myself very isolated.
So it's a good 2 years of that. Yeah, opioid hole.
Yeah.
How were you able to quit?
I feel even to this day, daily fortunate that I did that I was able to, because it just becomes so much your reality that you don't think you're going to be able to get out, or you don't even think you deserve to.
It's its own brainwashing, right? It alters your brain in a very significant way, and you can actually not even see any longer.
I remember a moment where I thought, could I go out today? Do I actually deserve to see the sun?
The deserving piece is so heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was. And then, but a friend of mine, I had one friend I continued to see, who's really wonderful, and we went out for coffee, and she said something like, "Well, I just wanted to observe that your boyfriend walks around like he's smarter than you, better looking, and funnier, but he's not any of those things, and he acts like he has his foot on your neck all the time." And that was very shocking to me.
Did you feel like that in the relationship? Like, this person's so much better than me?
Yeah, I felt he was very accomplished, and also I was kind of scared of him.
Yeah.
Did he feel familiar?
Probably. I would say probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, or he felt aspirational and also kind of scary. I felt like he could tell me truths about myself that I'd always needed to know. I mean, there are ways that these dark relationships have a cult-like element to them. And when I went to travel, the spell would break. This also happened. And it would just be it lifted.
It's so cult-like, these really, really controlling relationships, and even the strategies of separating you from your friends and all your support network. And then, I was even thinking when we were, did you watch Couples Therapy by chance?
I watched a bit of it, and I really like it.
Oh,
it's incredible. And then this one woman, and I won't use names because I don't want to get sued, but one woman is with a bona fide narcissist. And when she's explaining what they're going through to Orna, you can see that Orna's presence anchors her back into reality in a way that she's hearing what she's saying almost with an entirely new lens and realizing, oh, yeah, this motherfucker's crazy.
Yeah, you can remove yourself from being inside of it for a second when there's someone there who's just a third party. I mean, that's why therapy is so effective.
You have to consider how this person's hearing the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, just being there to either witness it or give you some sort of feedback can be this miraculous thing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're a professor of the history of science, which again, that's a discipline made up by Harvard, yeah?
Exactly, yeah. It first existed at Harvard.
Yeah. I wasn't even aware that was a discipline. But as I read the description, I'm like, oh, I love that. I think I would be very interested in that.
I think anyone who studies or is interested in the kind of questions anthropology asks would like history of science too, because it kind of asks similar questions, and it's infinitely interesting.
And am I right that a lot of the question is how do we know what we know, and how do we trust what we know, in a sense? Is that a common exploration in that?
Yeah. How does science gain its authority? What is the nature of scientific truth? I mean, it really asks big questions. And then, of course, as with any field, people get very specialized, but it's all kinds of interesting sub-questions because we have history of medicine, and I do history of behavioral sciences, which is more unusual, I guess.
Okay, so I guess let's start with, before we start there, I do want to ask this, 2 hours a day of meditation?
Yeah. Well, at least 2 hours.
At least 2 hours?
Yeah.
Were you meditating when we came in?
I was.
I know. I was like, I
disturbing.
No, it's just like a little moment.
That's great.
I do that before I have to go on stage or anything like that.
I know. I was thinking I could review my notes or because a little part of you wants to be like, what is in my book? But
Yes.
it's much better time used to just observe your sensations and things like that. So a great gift that came after this whole dark episode was learning to meditate and just having that practice. And I've kept it up, 2 hours a day. I've never missed a day since 2000. Wow. Except the 3 days my daughter was being born.
The 3 days.
Yeah, that's fair.
2002. Yeah, I was busy laboring.
Oh my God.
Will you do an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening generally?
Yeah, I do the same kind that Yuval Noah Harari does, just because I saw that he was on your show.
Love him.
I guess just because of my knowing what it was like not having that practice, I just never don't want to. And I get to choose to do it. So
Yeah,
it's a
I love
wonderful
that.
thing.
Yeah.
That's really
And your
cool.
family knows not to.
Well, when my daughter was little, she was always, I would actually hold her hand while, I mean, I adapted to
Sure,
my
sure.
life circumstances. So for 10 years, I would hold her hand while she was falling asleep and I would be meditating
Nice.
or holding her when she was a baby. But that would be the nighttime one or just to be flexible about it because life doesn't always give you an hour.
When brainwashing's been studied in the past, I guess you kind of lay out two methodologies, the analyst and the actor. Can you break that down for us?
These are methods from the history of science that I borrowed to apply to brainwashing. So you basically, with a topic that's as complex as brainwashing, where you could have, and you do have many definitions and philosophical questions and many directions you could go, you can use the actors category, which really means just like look at how people were using the word, how your actors were using it. And if your actors are scientific figures, then also look at how they're using it, even though they're also using it to analyze. So it's kind of a combination
Can
of
we get
the
an
two.
example?
Yeah, so one of the main figures in my book is this psychiatrist named Louis Jolyon West, whose papers I've been visiting for 16 years now or something, so I feel like I kind of know him. But he was one of the most prominent brainwashing experts, and he said many different things about brainwashing. One pivotal moment is he was called to the stand at the Patty Hearst trial, which was framed as a brainwashing trial.
That was the defense, right?
Her defense was that
For
she'd
Stockholm
been...
Syndrome, is that the first time we heard that?
Yeah, she never embraced that term and the legal team never used it, but
Okay.
people have applied that. Brainwashing was a term that her lawyer did try to use in her defense, and so they brought forward the most prominent experts in the world to make the case that she had not been responsible for her actions.
And for people who don't know, she was kidnapped. She lived with this far left-wing terrorist group for a while. They ended up robbing a bank, and she participated in the robbery.
It's also relevant that she was kidnapped from her apartment and held in a closet for about 70 days.
Yeah.
And blindfolded and subjected to Maoist reading of Maoist tracts and raped and, really horrors beyond what you could
Ungrounded,
imagine.
as you would say.
She was ungrounded. So these experts from the Korean War who had been military experts were called to examine her, and they saw parallels to what had happened. But anyway, look, this moment, so the moment when Louis Jolyon West takes the stand, is the judge or the prosecutor asks him, "What do you mean by brainwashing?" And he kind of says, "Well, actually, it's not a very scientific term, but what I really mean is," and he kind of starts to ramble on a little bit and say it's coercive persuasion, but the judge cuts him off and says, "Well, are you saying that could you get to the point, Dr. West?" At that moment, it seems like the case that Patty Hearst was trying to advance was kind of lost, like minutes into his testimony, because he was saying it really it doesn't have medical or scientific authority. But I think, but just like methodologically looking at that moment and seeing how the term appeared in public and it was rejected by the public as kind of something that made sense. So it allows me to follow these threads through the book, and it gave me some organizing principles.
But the actor analyst would be a lot of, if I'm getting this right, anyone that's studying something else, they might be confident in just their observations without ever really asking what the personal experience and point of view of the person being studied is and incorporating that aspect. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. So, right, you might stick to many people, I guess, are tempted to stick to an analyst point of view.
Yeah.
Or look at how to analyze a phenomenon that's very complicated, but it's almost like giving credence to the actors themselves and how they interacted, even with ideas.
Even, the Jonathan Haidt moral dumbfounding things, they're going to be as provocative as possible.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when you learn cultural relativism and anthropology, the one that they're going to hit you with every time is infanticide among Inuits, right? That they had some practice of killing firstborn daughters. And so if you were to only just observe this practice and make a conclusion, you would never have learned from the actor, well, a boy has to hunt for us to feed us as we get old. So first we have to have that. When that's secured, we can now afford to, you would never have learned even what the rationale behind it all was. I think it's like a very generous and respectful thing to assume the person you're studying has a total rhyme and reason for what they're doing, that they're not doing something completely void of any logic.
Exactly, and that's interesting in itself.
So this one will be even harder to explain, but you say the other superpower is second order observer.
I borrowed it from this sociologist named Nicholas Luhmann, and but what I mean by it is the idea of observing your observers. So after you've gone in and tried to see from the point of view of people involved, even if they're experts, they're also your actors, then you pull back and try to observe the system itself.
Is this a good example? I always think of the Stanford prison experiment. Initially, they think they're studying the students who have gotten too much authority and abuse it quickly and abuse these people. But then if you pull back further, you have to acknowledge that the constructor of the actual experiment is himself.
Philip Zimbardo.
Nice. Zimbardo.
Nice. Yes.
This has been
It's been a runner of us trying to remember
getting
his
it
name.
wrong most often, and then
Yeah.
finally it's cemented.
No, that there are, right, when you can keep, actually, I think there might be more than a second order observer, but
For
you can keep
that.
pulling back the frame, as you're saying.
Yeah, that he himself, Zimbardo, was a victim of the exact same behavior he was observing and trying to understand, because he himself had elevated his authority and detachment from everything.
This makes my husband very upset, actually, because he feels that Zimbardo should not have taken credit for this brilliant experiment and profited off it when he basically became part of the experiment. But that he does say that.
He acknowledges
He
He acknowledges
that.
it, yeah.
Then everyone becomes part of it, right?
Right.
Like if you are the analyst, you also are entering in, and then where do you break off, or we're all just a part of everything?
It's also a law of physics, which is if you observe light, depending on how you observe it, it's either a particle or it's a
Wave.
A wave, thank you. And that can change depending on the observation of it. So certainly brainwashing's existed for probably since humans have been humans, but we get kind of aware of it from the Korean War. Is that where we start really trying to study it and understand it?
Yeah, that's when it actually has a moment when it enters the English language. Edward Hunter, who was an operative and journalist who worked for the OSS in China in the 1930s, started collecting a lot of examples of propaganda and observing what he thought was this new kind of weapon that communists had as they rose to power.
At that time, would we not say it would be propaganda?
Well, he's exactly. There is a distinction. He had that background as an expert in propaganda, but he starts to talk about brainwashing right before the Korean War, when around the time that this famous incident was that Cardinal Mindszenty, who was a Polish high-level, priest and religious hero and just national treasure, he was arrested in 1948. He disappeared for 28 days, and nobody knew what happened to him, but he was taken by the secret police of Hungary, and then he came back, and he looked like a shadow of himself, like a gray puppet, and he was paraded before the newsreel cameras, and he confessed to these outrageous crimes that he couldn't even have possibly committed, like he had stolen religious artifacts, and he said he had taken money from the church. And even though he'd left a note, he said, if I'm arrested, don't believe anything I say when I come back. Yet this still happened to him. And it was almost like he was a trophy for these new communist governments, like an announcement that we can do this. And he did return to himself within a couple of years, and he said, without knowing what had happened to me, I had become another person.
And you say, becoming someone else was alarming enough, but the nightmarish part was that you had no ability to recognize that this had happened. So even scarier than becoming different is you wouldn't have even noticed it.
Yeah, that first part, without knowing. So within 28 days, like fairly fast. And then he also revealed what had happened to him, although he didn't have full memory of it.
And if you think of your stereotype of someone susceptible to this type of thing, it's not a leader in the church who's got charisma and all these people skills and a great education and all these other tropes we think would inoculate you from this, right?
Really a hero to his people, and someone who also knew what was coming. He knew that there was a possible threat to himself, so he could have been prepared, or he probably did try to prepare himself. But one interesting thing about it, he may have been drugged. He said he thinks he was drugged, and he was pushed around. He was not a young man, and he was sleep deprived. But one of the things that struck me was that he recalled that he was stripped of his clerical robes and he was made to wear a clown costume and he kind of had to, crawl. And so there were these status-based humiliations.
Also, a quite literal stripping of someone's identity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's often the case that removal even of someone's name is very effective. Like in the Stanford prison experiments, one of the first things they do is force the guards only refer to the prisoners as numbers. It's very effective.
How much were people doing brainwashing things that they didn't even know they were doing? So like a long-standing tradition is to shave all of the cadets' heads. So that's part of it. You're actually stealing their identity from them. How calculated was it, or how in on it? Or some of these things just naturally happened, yeah?
I think it's often not calculated, which is kind of surprising because it follows a seemingly ironclad series of steps, but people seem to invent it spontaneously in some cases. Like in the case of Patty Hearst, we were just talking about the guy who was in charge of her abduction and re-education. He said, he kept asking her, "You're not brainwashed, are you?" Because he wanted to believe that she was truly converted to his cause.
Had come to see the value of it.
That it wasn't that she had been not allowed to go to the bathroom and she had been raped and things like that. For him, it had to be real. He was also, I guess, in it as
right.
Definitely.
He was susceptible. And you can see that with Cardinal Mindszenty. There was a Soviet method that was borrowed by the Hungarian police. And there's a long history of, what they say in Pulp Fiction, that getting medieval on your, there are ways to to unmake someone that seem to be part of the human repertoire. But in what was different maybe in the middle of the 20th century is that they did sometimes, psychiatrists and sociologists and experts both would choreograph it sometimes, and then in the U.S. they actually responded to this crisis by
outdevelop their opponents. Maybe.
Yeah, weaponize it or use it as a defensive.
So I guess I didn't know a lot of this, which is shameful, but you do a great job of painting a picture of what the Korean War was, which was, initially it was called a police action. These young kids went, one of the main characters in your book is a 17-year-old boy who's in 11th grade, and he signs up before his senior year, and he goes over there thinking he's a part of a police mission. They arrive. They are using all the equipment from World War II. They don't have any new guns, new tanks, new anything. Things are breaking. Helicopters are falling apart. The enemy has all new Russian stuff because they're backed by Russia by proxy of China.
Yeah.
So they're getting slaughtered and outgunned, and their full sense of what an American is at that point is starting to really fracture. Like, we're supposed to be indomitable. We're supposed to have the highest tech everything. And all these young guys end up as prisoners of war. Mm-hmm. And tell us about the Tiger March. That was particularly grueling and
almost the definition of brutal. So the Tiger Death March, thousands of U.S. soldiers, when they were captured, they were forced, they were marched north to and stayed overnight in these kind of series of impromptu camps, sometimes in old mines and sometimes in ramshackle buildings. It was under the oversight of a commander nicknamed Tiger, and he would sometimes, when they walked along these mountain roads, he would just push soldiers off.
Oh my God.
Who are all completely malnourished. They have zero energy. They're already physically quite diminished. They don't have the right gear. It's freezing.
Yeah. And they were joined by some civilians on this march. So because there were monks and nuns and missionaries and things like that who were leaving or who were being captured in Korea, who had been serving, in churches, seen as enemies. So they were being marched to. So during this march, sometimes soldiers would, even though they were emaciated, sometimes they'd lost half their body weight, they would try to help one of their compatriots or a civilian, such as there was a nun named Mother Beatrix, I think, and she was in her 80s, and she was, struggling, of course. And the North Korean soldiers said, "Just leave her, we'll take her in the cart." And then they heard gunshots and never saw her again. Other times, soldiers would just drop dead along the road because they couldn't take another step. So it was one of the most grueling and demoralizing. I mean, a missionary who had passed by them on a train said he couldn't recognize them as American soldiers.
And when they made it after
horrifying.
these long marches and they got in these camps, then the camps were often even more brutal. They would have thought once the walking was done.
Yeah.
I mean, long story short, it's all really, really heartbreaking and worth learning about. But, you know, at the end of all this, there are 21 of these guys who go through this process, who choose to stay in China and take on wives, Korean wives, have children. They do get completely converted to some degree. And there's a process by which they do it. And I wonder, we get into now Mao Zedong. And so he is the leader of China, and he has something called the method or re-education or thought reform. And it has a very predictable and formatted approach, which is discussion, criticism, and unity. So take us from these guys who are in these camps completely deep, as you would say, ungrounded. I think it's worthwhile to explain what ungrounded is.
I like to think of it as a series of successive shocks to the point of disorientation or sometimes utter demoralization. So again, you know, your expectations are not met, to say the least. And sometimes the soldiers have been told, you'll be home by Thanksgiving. And instead, they're being marched north. They're in the camps. Men would die in the camps initially when the North Koreans were running them before the Chinese took over. They would die just by falling in the latrine and not having the strength to get out, which was a pit. And then seeing your compatriots die that way and knowing that your government had failed. Sometimes they were also bombed by the U.S. own
napalm.
They're sometimes napalm by their own side. So it was destabilizing of sense of faith in one's own nation. But sometimes they would also just die overnight. They were living with corpses. So this prepares the way for a more targeted ideological remolding, which is what happened. And then interestingly enough, and I think I learned this at a conference a few years ago, by the scholar named Aminda Smith, who specializes in Chinese history, that people who know about this consistently underestimate the extent to which the POWs were subjected. It was kind of an experiment that Mao was running. He wanted to see if the method he used on Chinese people would also work on American GIs and officers.
Yeah, because the method was designed to treat peasants one way and landowners and landlords another way. It was a very rigid prescription. And his conclusion was, well, these infantrymen are the peasants, right? They're not the landowners. The generals are the landowners. So they would receive those two different approaches.
Exactly.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
But it's really interesting that the discussion part, it would start, this kind of re-education, or the method would start with urging these people over and over again for a very, very long time to journal their life story. And in some fascinating way, none of these people had experienced therapy prior to this. This wasn't a thing people did.
Yeah.
So this is like a very unique experience too. And comforting versus what they had just experienced. Because when you're journaling, then you get to sit next to a stove, right? So there's these little incentives along the way. And through the telling of your story over and over and over again, you then get into a zone of criticism. And this is where you have to kind of defend your nation's ethics, how they treat Black people. That was a big issue they would remind everyone of. And they're now putting you in a position to have to defend your story or your identity or your sense of reality. And then lastly is unity. And now they're going to explain this other way of thinking that is so much more beneficial and so much more collaborative and helpful.
One example, this isn't from the camps themselves, but from a re-education center that a Western doctor was subjected to. So he was seen as more elite. So I think it was more brutal in a way. But I mean, he was chained and, brutally interrogated and things like that. But one thing, like as he slept at night, if he if he moved around, because he was in a small cell with 10 to 12 people, they called it capitalist expansion. Like he had to justify just sleeping or moving and
man-spreading.
Oh my God.
It's the earliest version of man-spreading.
And they also reinterpret because they would take your own words, your own journal, but 91% of the troops, so there were probably hundreds of U.S. troops there and also some UN troops, were given these books, and they were actually, kind of made to answer questions about their family life and their relationships at school.
What's interesting about that, and I think why, as we see it come up in modern society in a far more innocuous way, often people haven't ever taken the time to try to explain their worldview.
Yeah.
Probably nobody really has taken the time to write out what their worldview is, what the ethics are of the country they are loyal to. So in doing that, it's a very clever way to establish a little anxiety in your own understanding of why and what you do. You know, it's probably the first time you've questioned any of this.
The guy you were just mentioning, Morris Wills, he enlisted at 17, he said, we were never taught a word in high school about our system or about communism. He said, it would have been helpful. We should have been taught just so we would know what we were fighting and also how to defend our own system. But he felt really unequipped.
So now's a good time to also introduce, because now these men there's two waves, right? There's the small wave and the big wave of men starting to return. The first wave is like 139 guys. And then over time, it's 3,600 or something massive like that. And people are coming back with varying levels of vacancy and being visibly disturbed. Then you have the people who stayed.
Yeah.
And so now men are coming back, and now is where we should learn, like, our understanding of trauma doesn't exist to the point where the word trauma is almost not even a word in the 50s, right? So as they're seeing all this bizarre behavior, everyone stateside is assuming this is brainwashing, not, this is a traumatic response to this horrendously traumatic experience.
Yeah, it was invisible. The trauma was invisible partly because people didn't think the way we do. Of course, today we complain that we've gone too far the other direction. Perhaps that we see it everywhere at every moment. Like if your latte order didn't turn out right, then I was
PTSD.
traumatized.
Yeah, exactly.
But a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist, he was trained in the 60s, and he said you just didn't expect to see it. You might see one or two cases in your lifetime, but you would also think if there were one or two cases, these men would have seemed to be qualified. But I did not find them ever described as traumatized, and I think there are a number of political and social reasons why. Although there's one mentioned by Robert J. Lifton, kind of not diagnosing them as traumatized, but just mentioning their experience was traumatic. But other than that, in the hundreds of pages, there's no mention of this. And I think it's partly like one thing I call the volleyball problem, which is that even though the men had, been starved to the point of nutritional deficiency and often death, by the time the Chinese took over the camps, which is sometimes a year later, they were eating better and they were able to gain back weight. And the Chinese ran this POW Olympics, which they kind of used as a PR opportunity, and they showed pictures of the men in, uniforms,
having fun,
doing gymnastics, pulling, and things like that. Yeah, so that's why I call it the volleyball problem, because it looks like it's okay. It was just propaganda for the international courts. I think this is one of the profound parts of it, is because it didn't have marks. It didn't show. Their suffering didn't show. The men themselves despaired that anyone would ever understand.
Yeah, maybe the amputees that came back, which there were.
That's true, there were.
They would have maybe been like, they went through some shit, but the rest of the guys played volleyball.
It wouldn't have been, you would have just been like, that's war, not this psychological element.
Yeah.
You can't see that.
Right.
But after a time, the Korean War just became, it's known as the Forgotten War, but it became synonymous with these brainwashed men. They were seen as just either cowards or freaks or potentially
weak,
just
that they had succumbed to this propaganda easily, that they were, really weak. And also it's worth pointing out that in the entire Korean War, there was only a single psychologist on the ground at the time.
Yeah.
And then when they return, though, now dozens of psychiatrists and psychologists are deployed to now study these guys.
Yes.
And so what do they find? Because now this sets us in motion on our own program, right?
It does. It very much has waves of effects. The only time they compare them with veterans of other wars or POWs from other wars is initially. They think that maybe it's something like what happened in World War II, which was a condition called rice brain, which involved sort of men drinking too much and unable to control their behavior. We'd probably call it PTSD today. Yeah. And they were said never to recover. So there was one article that initially, right after the men came back, compared them to that, but subsequently was more framed as something unique and knew that was happening. And it fell into this narrative that the communists had a weapon that had never before been seen in history. And there was, said to be the level of collaboration or indoctrination among American troops was said to be, a national emergency. And the different experts found different things, used different methods. Sometimes they gave them the Rorschach test. They gave them some sort of psychoanalysis sometimes, but mostly not for healing, but more to try to understand what had happened to them and whether this could be distilled into a method that could either be protected against
or learned
or
and
perhaps used.
Yeah.
Defended against or deployed on your enemies.
Yeah.
So is this SIR comes out of this, survival, evasion, resistance, escape?
Exactly.
That's the result?
So there were survival schools already used for to prepare troops for deployment, in which they would have to, they would be sent off to the wilderness and had to survive like for 3 days with limited amount of equipment, but they added a resistance component. So it was called SEER, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, Escape. And this was developed directly out of the Korean War by Louis Jolyon West and others. And the resistance was really to create a mock prison camp, POW camp, stocked by Eastern European.
They were stand-ins for the Koreans?
Well, stand-ins for just who might be capturing you in the future. Men would be interrogated there and brutalized and basically waterboarded or...
In the training?
In the training, yeah. It often involved being punched until you fell down to the ground and then when you struggled to stand up, being kicked or punched again. So for over time, and so the person would lose track of the fact that their antagonist torturing them was actually a fellow member of the military, but they would, fall under this disorienting condition. They would then maybe be locked in a Syrian box, which meant this tiny box, sometimes in the sun where you couldn't move your limbs, and they would start to, really people would lose their minds.
So we were doing this to our own people.
Our own troops.
Regularly. Get them ready for this.
Them from
How is that going to do anything if you're just doing the exact same thing?
Well, that's my question. So I wonder how effective it was, because obviously was the men who went to Vietnam, had they received this training?
They had,
by and
all
large?
of them. 30,000 men initially right after in 1956 went through this training to see if it was working. So it was regularized and routinized and then applied to any service member who was in danger of being captured. They also instilled the Uniform Code of Conduct, which mandated that you couldn't say anything more than name, rank, and serial number, which was supposed to address this kind of brainwashing problem. So during Vietnam, brainwashing didn't really arise again, but I don't necessarily think it was being attempted either.
I was going to say, how do we know if that was a failed attempt by the Vietnamese or the great training the GIs received?
There was classic torture,
but that's different.
that John McCain or Admiral Stockdale experienced. But that was different. It had a different... it had different purpose.
Yeah.
They weren't that interested in ideological remolding or converting during Vietnam, but nonetheless, the training continued, and they were finding that troops themselves were were damaged, that it was so brutal that that's actually...
even if it's pretend.
Yeah, it's not pretend if you're actually going through all the stuff.
Pretend broken ribs.
So they brought in the same experts to modify the training so that it wasn't actually crippling the men. Nonetheless, it was still very brutal. And even today, there are legends about it, and you can hear. And if you get in the company of veterans, they'll often tell you their SEER stories, although technically they're not really supposed They're supposed to talk about it, but
It's also really easy to underestimate just how young all these people are. It's like you're also their identity isn't even solidified yet.
I think people who think they could never be brainwashed could definitely be brainwashed. Maybe the most susceptible.
That's a great synopsis of what I agree with you. I mean, I think like that 100% certainty.
Yes.
Is probably a sign. Like you could even use the Milgram experiments as another example of that.
We talk about him too, shocks. We've learned some stuff over the years here.
It probably comes up sometimes in your interviews.
There's like 5 studies we give marshmallow, delayed gratification.
Classic touchstones.
They're ubiquitous.
They're so good because they're almost like parables of our time.
Yes.
They're our Bible in a sense.
I teach a whole class on them because if the deeper you go in them, like and historically, they're very interesting. But with Milgram, there are people, I mean, as people watch the film, they often become convinced one way or the other. It's rare for someone to become convinced that they are sure they would have given shocks.
Right.
I've heard of one person saying that, which I think is admirably honest.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, she's a psychologist. But most students, I can see them wrestling, and people don't always talk about what they think. But when you see someone who's 100% certain and even mocking those who gave shocks or who succumbed to this kind of intensive situation, it shows a kind of lack of imagination potentially of what it might be like. And that also who's being tortured in this experiment, it's kind of invisible to us.
Right.
If you told Monica she could get an A if she zapped people, she would have done it.
That's mean. That's not even about brainwashing. That's just like trying to get ahead. I don't
No,
need
Milgram.
I know.
But you said you get an A+ if you shock those people.
Still mean because
I know.
No, I have a lot of integrity.
I know you
but
do.
I definitely think I could have ended up doing that with the thought that like I guess it's fine. I mean, I could just see it. I could see it. Yeah. And we had somebody on I thought was so interesting who talked about this experiment, but also talked about the rookie cops in the George Floyd situation. And her whole take was sort of like, everyone watches that and thinks like, how come they didn't do anything? This is crazy. And she's like, most people in that position would not do anything. Yeah. And to like go, walk around with this like moral high ground when you've never been in any of these positions is crazy to me. I'm always like, yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have done anything too.
Yeah. You just don't know.
Exactly.
And I think living your life so that should that occasion arise, you would know how to act.
Yeah. I think there's something really, I mean, this is a weird way of looking at it, but like with you with addiction and probably with you, and I have some things that I've done that I am shocked I did. Like I would never have thought my identity would not have lined up with certain actions. Yeah. And so if you have experienced that, I think it's easier to say like, we all sometimes do things we don't think. Who knows
what I'm capable of?
Who knows what anyone is.
Yeah.
People like Thich Nhat Hanh write about is like, it's easy to be sympathetic of the victim, but to understand the capacity we all have. I was thinking about the fascination with scams we have, which is somewhat related to how people respond to brainwashing or cults. Is like, it's very reassuring to say, that's so absurd. If anyone details a scam that someone fell for, I mean, I even do this too, where you think at this point, I never would have believed they were an FBI. There's something wrong with them. You try to identify that moment where you wouldn't have, or it's not you, just not me.
So that you're not scared.
Yeah, it's reassuring. You can turn it around and make it reassuring, but actually these things are profoundly destabilizing because we're all subject to them.
Yeah.
So how did MK Ultra and the CIA take what they had learned from these Korean POWs and improve them and or perfect them?
Well, MK Ultra was secretly funded in 1953 by the CIA to be a kind of comprehensive program investigating various routes for massive behavioral change. Or to go back to Cardinal Manzenti, the idea, could you make someone into another person? And perhaps even like a perfect assassin or just an operative, or could it be used for interrogation purposes or things like that? So really they created zones of free investigation clandestinely, and they funded them through conduits or cutouts. And there were about 150 sub-projects.
150.
I think around 150.
Wow.
And some of them quite small, some of them involving dolphins, some potential dolphin assassins.
Some fell in love with those dolphins. We talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
But then a lot of them involving LSD or hypnosis or the ability to create dissociative states and sort of, unground systematically subjects in different ways so that they could be transformed. And so they really took the brainwashing episodes and created a scientific and military mandate. A lot of what the social sciences were interested in was creating a better running society in which people would assume their roles without being asked. So they would internalize codes and normalize, routines and things like that. So
Behave.
kind of behave because too much, I guess you could really say that too much democracy was seen as concerning because surely each person couldn't just go about living as they wanted to. So there were ways that behaviorism and, learning theory, that was also flourishing during this time.
Do we have any smoking gun from the very top in with a president's awareness going this is the goal. We're going to start subliminally doing this, or we're going to try to start on a huge grand scale doing this?
Dean Acheson, actually, the Secretary of State
Under Truman?
Yeah, he said, we're in the United States, we're willing to let the rest of the world live as they want to live as long as they believe as we do. There's a sense that if you could have a kind of inner conformity, people could go about their business. I don't know that he intended it exactly as I'm interpreting it, but I would say that this describes the project that you also see among many behavioral scientists, which was seen in rats running through mazes and in elaborate Skinnerian systems where people are just responding to these kind of conditioning messages in order to take on certain roles. And that people actually, that it was for the common good because people don't actually know what they want. So might as well.
We have a rise of cults as well. It's the heyday, the 70s. When does the cult phenomena start taking up?
I think it picks up in the late 60s.
Manson's late 60s, I guess.
Charles Manson. And he overlaps or intersects with MK Ultra projects.
He was a participant?
Well, this is one thing I've been hot on the trail of this. And you may know about the book Chaos by Tom O'Neill, where he investigates this as well. But in the Louis Jolyon West papers, where I just was yesterday, I found more evidence that that basically West, who was one of the CIA's main behavioral experts, who went back to the Korean War, he had investigated the pilots, the soldiers. He'd done many other things, but he ran a project in Haight-Ashbury that was affiliated with the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, and he was calling it the Amphetamine Research Project. And he had several people working under him, some of whom went to do ethnographic field work with the Manson family in Mendocino. And the Amphetamine Research Project was run by Roger Smith, who was Charles Manson's parole officer in addition to being a psychologist. And Roger Smith he got a grant with Louis Jolyon West. So that you can bring them very close together. Yeah. This was before the Manson family committed the crimes for which they're known.
I guess my question is, do these cult leaders stumble upon this stuff intuitively, or was there at some point a guidebook for people?
I think mostly they intuitively, there's a kind of a guidebook that they intuitively play out. This is my sense. And often it comes out of these extreme hierarchical power relationships that they cultivate, the effects of charisma, also just the cycles of blissful release that their followers get in cults, I think creates this kind of dynamic where the cult leader is almost jealous of his followers, and then it leads to a kind of abuse or what?
Some kind of sadism or something?
Yeah, there's all sorts of dynamics that emerge in cults. And in the late 60s, before the Manson murders, cults are still kind of seen as intriguing.
Yeah, what's the difference between an ashram and a cult? People are starting to live communally as the love movement's happening.
There are all kinds of love movements. There are the many back to the land, which I've always found fascinating. Of course, the definition of a group as a cult is not always ironclad. It could be a cult in some cases, it's very damaging for one person, but it could be briefly healthy or liberatory for someone else. So it's tricky.
Well, I'm obsessed with cult docs. I think I've watched every single one of them.
Everyone is. They're
And what's undeniable is there's a huge period of bliss, of improvement, of growth, of community, of connection. I even look at, you look at the Rajneeshis. It's like, if they don't go to war with their neighbors, I don't know that the thing ever goes sideways. It's like they're all pretty happy, but now they need to outvote the town, so they got to bring in homeless people, and then they lose control of that. Now they're poisoning a salad bar in town. It's like, before this dispute happened, they're all kind of dancing and moaning and yelling. And
I think one could argue, if I were going to write a review of that Wild Wild Country, I would say that they selectively framed it, because I think the cavorting wild dances and the realization, the sexual splendor. My husband grew up in the Bay Area around this time, and he's like, they're not showing the automatic weapons they were all carrying that whole time. I mean, they were heavily into gun trafficking and drugs. And I think the documentary also kind of takes the focus off of Osho, as if he was kind of blissfully going along, and his second in command was poisoning the salad bars. But actually,
Manan Sheila, she's like my biggest crush ever.
Yeah.
God, what a powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean.
You sent like a 23-year-old girl from India to the U.S. and said, build me a city, and she did? What a woman.
Think about what she could have done if she didn't
if she
get
worked for
swept
MK Ultra.
up. Yeah.
I kind of bought that in because of my addiction background, right? So Osho was, as we learned, completely, he's a benzo addict. He's like on a ton of Valium.
Yeah.
So I did buy into I bet he was checked out and funking occasionally, but not. There's no way he would have bothered himself with any of the...
Yeah, I suppose that's true, but he still was heavily involved in the manipulative practices.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't...
Yeah, he did have this special access that no one had without him.
He also had a lot of needs for all the Rolls Royces and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So incongruous, the whole flashy nature of him.
It's so wild. I think the big party conversation people have is like, would you be susceptible to a cult? But... are we all susceptible to starting cults? Is everyone equally, maybe you give someone enough power and we could all be that?
She's subtweeting me right now.
I'm asking a real question.
No, that's an interesting twist on the question. Would you join? Not would you join a cult, but might you start a cult?
Exactly.
You can see people get carried away by a little bit of power in many. Right. I used to say that with teaching assistants sometimes in graduate school. Give them a little bit of power. Suddenly they're patrolling the classroom, causing all kinds of ruckus.
Yes,
they're guard.
But not everyone did that in the Stanford prison experiments. But a couple people show a real aptitude for it, like the John Wayne character in that one. So it's just that it's a complex condition that we're all involved in.
So can you tell us the steps of indoctrinate, how it works in a cult before, you enter, hey, my name's Dax, and then I wake up and I'm clearly a devotee of a cult. What things have to happen?
I mean, if you're talking about an abusive cult, there has to be a condition where you encounter a recruitment that you may not know is a recruitment, or you may be misinformed about the nature of the group. Sometimes it's just, you were standing on one street corner, not another. You were waiting for one bus where they happen to be, sending people out, but you're maybe misinformed. You attend a meeting. So you're drawn in to some degree. You are exposed to group activities. You're probably love bombed.
Yeah.
It can happen extremely quickly, and I think many people are surprised by that.
Would it be fair to say they would be already over-indexing and being ungrounded? Because that seems consistent when I look at the people who joined NXIVM or the people who joined all these groups. They already felt a little untethered or unmoored, and they were in search already of something.
I think we underestimate how incredibly socially attuned we all are. I mean, when I was a freshman in college, my roommate and I, on one of the first days of school, we saw a flyer that said free vegetarian dinner, and we were very excited. Yeah. So we presented ourselves there, and there was indeed a free dinner. And then afterwards, these members of the group said, could you just sign this piece of paper and just say, it's just pro forma, but you would be the vice president of our group. And we were 2 days into school and we signed it. And then the next day, the dean of the college called us and said, did you really mean to do this? And we were like, no, we
don't even know what it means. What does it mean?
We didn't even know what it meant, but
What did it mean?
It meant that they had the right to be on campus. They just wanted a toehold in campus. It was Krishna,
Krishnas.
maybe, but they didn't really tell us what they were.
They are vegetarian.
So often, the vegetarian. Be careful.
It feels so friendly, right?
Be careful with vegetarian.
Like you get invited to like a smoke competition, like a barbecue.
Yeah.
You're like, shit, there might be some fights, but you hear free vegetarian food and you just think, this is going to be some peace.
Well, there's
Well,
many
the
things that
opposite
work
direction.
quite well, like especially for a seeker. Most people are seekers to some degree. An invitation to an environmental group or something that seems very benign or altruistic, and especially if it's misrepresented, just getting the person there, exposing them to these intense conversations, not letting them be alone, sometimes not letting them even go to the bathroom alone, if they'll, agree.
Well, I was thinking of the Maoist stuff, the method that seems really present in a lot of these cult documentaries I've watched is like you have food restriction quite often. You have the narrative part where you're telling your own story. There's kind of like a therapy aspect where you're the discussion, where you're implored to talk about your childhood and explore that. It's like you can see that it has the same arc almost as the Mao
It really
method.
does. And that's why the experts who had studied the POW said cults, they recognize this. And there's a revelation of the self. There's also exposure to texts and lectures and discussions. There's often sleep deprivation too. Like a famous cult deprogrammer from the 70s, Ted Patrick, he said, his son was at 14 was almost lured onto this school bus that was commandeered by the Children of God, which is one of the most notorious cults. And his son luckily escaped. But he then went the next day to see what was happening, and he stayed overnight. And he said, even though he was, a 45-year-old man with a lot of veteran, and he was a lot of experience, and a man of God, he said, you just don't. You're bombarded by so much information and this intense eye contact, and never getting to go to the bathroom by yourself. You're very sleep deprived. They're playing scripture over and over because they will mobilize, biblical sayings to kind of just change the tone. Also being asked about your bank account simultaneously, that he said it's extreme. He said he found himself being unmoored, even though he had explicitly come there to kind of understand and demystify it.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Have either of you thought to yourself, I am in a cult? Because I have two personal experiences.
I've had cult-like, definitely not for real, but cult-like experiences. Part of that is a good business sometimes has that.
Totally.
Like what Soul Cycle had cult-like things around it, and its own language and its own, that whole thing, which all of our tech companies have all of that. They have rungs and their own language and their own this, and it's very culty. I wouldn't call it a cult though. And UCB had its own. That was improv. Was school and theater, but it was culty. You wanted to rise in the ranks. You wanted to become. You wanted to be beloved there. But no, not for real. Did you?
Or even Harvard, people say, it resembles a cult in a certain way, just because there's certain language. We use only special language there it is
You're very
an
in-group, out-group. There's a very,
that's
a very...
It's a powerful experience just to be socialized in that way, and it can have resonances with a cult. But I'm curious
For me,
about
AA, for sure.
Yeah.
It's, in so many ways, it is a cult. If I look at, and then I definitely look at the methodology by which they get you is anyone coming to an AA meeting for their first time is already ungrounded. That's why they're there.
Yeah.
Their life is obliterated. They don't know who they are. They've been acting in all these ways that are inconsistent with their morals. So we did the work for you. We show up kind of deconstructed.
Yeah.
And it's a group, and there's language, and there's a text, and it has a lot of built-in non-falsifiable claims, right? You don't have to believe in God, but you do. There's a lot of clever...
There's a lot of story building and sharing.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. It's almost
Confessing.
exclusively
Yeah.
That's powerful.
sharing your story, exploring it, learning a new way to live. So it's interesting. I've been in it and I'm aware of that. And yet I go, well, the alternative for me was death. So this is far preferable. I can handle being in this cult. Now I think, forget cult. What I really think is brainwashing. What is a little bit unique and good about AA is there's no leader. I think that's what saves it from being potentially destructive, because it's this very powerful mechanism that could destroy people if there were even a single leader.
Right.
Like we don't even get, there's not even a person in charge of the room, thank God.
Yeah.
So that's its kind of maybe built-in safety net. But the way I think over 21 years of being there is I find myself recognizing, that's very regimented, that's very myopic, that's very unflexible, that doesn't account for the variety of human beings there are in the world. Like there's a lot of things I have to confront, but it is so. I was having a conversation with a great friend of mine who's been in it at roughly the same time as me. He's older, he's a genius. And we were talking, and we share a therapist. And the therapist comes from this very unique point of view, which is he was in the program for a long time. He was an addict, but he stopped going. And he also treats a lot of people. And he's like, there are some givens we learned that I don't know that I believe are givens. And then so like hearing someone in authority who is smart and trustworthy, even just that little poke. And then I found myself saying to my friend the other night, like, this part's a little weird. And I don't know, it's fascinating. To me, I would probably put it more in the brainwashing category. And I don't even think nefariously. Again, there's no one in charge, but I do recognize I have to weed through a lot of thinking that's pretty ironclad in my head.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences.
You have?
Yeah, for example, a lot of former addicts gravitate towards Ashtanga yoga, which I did too.
Yeah.
Well, I love yoga anyway.
Yeah.
For the last 35 years or so. But Ashtanga is like this particular form that's very intensive, and it did have a guru.
Okay.
Who passed away. I wasn't interested in that personally, but it just felt like such a health-giving practice. And even though I could hear the criticisms, it turns out he was making these invasive adjustments of women.
Like
pelvic adjustments that he claimed were, it's a little bit like those gymnastics.
Guy, Larry Nassar.
And like the Bikram.
Yeah, but I don't think I think he was just having sex with people.
Well, he's doing it all.
Yeah, he was mandating massages.
Right.
But with Ashtanga, it was this interesting reckoning over the last 5 or 6 years. But I had already, for other reasons, kind of modified my yoga practice. But people who were present when it was happening, but said they either just didn't see it or didn't think it was what it was, or the person involved seemed fine, or they told themselves it was okay, or this whole reckoning in the community. Also the fact that the adjustments can be quite abusive and cause so much damage and so many injuries over the years, but people want this kind of very extreme. They want an extreme experience, and it will deliver that for sure.
Yeah,
so it's like a high, which is one thing you have to I think that it's bringing awareness to whatever you do. You may feel like, I finally found this. This is the antidote.
Okay, so that's all the things we've talked about now are what we might call hard brainwashing. Tell us about soft brainwashing, and tell us what's pervasive in our current landscape that we need to be aware of, and tell us how it works and what things are out there.
The history is meant to bring us up to the present moment and give us some tools to think about our current destabilizing environment. And I looked at the emergence of social media and some key moments that are often not talked about. So if you look at there's a famous experiment Facebook ran in 2012, but it was published in 2014, where they gave 700,000 users. They changed the feed a little bit emotionally. They changed the emotional valence of their feed. So a subgroup, without telling them, although it's part of your user agreement that you could be experimented on, but people didn't know that. So some of the people received a more positive feed, as judged by the word count and the emotional valence, and others received a more negative one. And those whose feed was adjusted negatively, they then counted how they reacted. Did they post more negatively or react more negatively?
They also, were they counting how much time spent on the app itself, maybe?
They've counted engagement in subsequent experiments.
Okay.
But in this one, they mostly counted how they responded, and they found that there was a statistically significant shift in the emotional content of the responses when your feed was altered more negatively, and sometimes to a greater degree than your posting or reactions would be more negative. And so this was confirmed as a case of proving or operationalizing emotional contagion at a distance. People just could be exposed to this change, and then their internal states would then change. And so the interesting thing I found in examining this experiment was that, first of all, that Facebook published it in a prominent journal, PNAS, and that it's sort of like a self-congratulatory move, which they never, again, really repeated because it caused so much controversy. But when you look at the actual article, they cite a 1990 definition of emotional contagion, where they get this idea of mass emotional contagion at scale. And this was from a team of researchers at the University of Hawaii. And if you look at how they defined emotional contagion, they were actually drawing on a memoir of trauma that was written by Vivian Gornick called Fierce Attachment. They say this is how we define emotional contagion, is what happened between this woman and her mother, who was an extremely disturbed woman, and she had a really complex relationship with her daughter. And Vivian Gornick wrote this wonderful book, Fierce Attachment, which is kind of a masterpiece describing the spread of trauma between a mother and daughter and these intense emotions. And that's the definition that Facebook was using of emotional contagion. So it's kind of built into the experiment, I'm arguing. In a second way, they also, when they used the word counting software that they drew on, which is called Luke, this software was based on the diaries of people who had been asked to write about the worst experience of their lives. And that was how they came to define the words they used. I guess I would argue that although that we focus on messaging, but what I want to show is that there's a kind of level of trauma and intense emotion or emotional suffering that's kind of built into the operations of the app. There's also, Catherine Liu, this interesting scholar at University of California, shows that trauma, and I think she's writing a new book about this, but that it kind of can be profited. It's very profitable in the apps. It draws eyes, it draws traffic, and things like that. So it's kind of like a trafficking. And it also, people who do content moderation are constantly exposed to it. So there's this way that similar to the brainwashing episodes of the classic brainwashing or hard brainwashing, there's a way it's steeped in trauma and yet not necessarily recognized as such.
And people will now point out people voluntarily complied with that, right? Like we started just giving you a full-time access to ourselves and filming everything we do. But it's both sides are working, right? Because people are posting their trauma.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I like the definition of brainwashing as coercive persuasion, because it's not pure coercion. There's an element of participation. There always is. There's a kind of a yes, even if it's unknown to yourself or not perfectly understood. There's a collaborative element, which I think is what makes it interesting and why we often want to see it as things it's uncomfortable to think about.
Well, we're a lot more comfortable with the notion someone chose to smoke cigarettes and that's why they have lung cancer. They just lived a perfect life and they got lung cancer. We don't like that. That's very scary. That means we might get lung cancer.
Yeah.
But we do love an element of complicity, right? It helps us not take on so much anguish because you go, they kind of elected to do that.
But I think we also like a victim and a
oppressor.
Villain. Yeah. But to know that everyone's kind of doing both things makes everything very complicated.
Cults are perfect examples of that as well, because you you forget that everyone except the leader at the top is both pulled in, victimized, but also often actively victimizing. It's hard to know where to draw the line.
Yeah, they're on mission. They're converting.
Yeah.
I have to say, and this is sounds dismissive to other cult members, but like Nexium interested me the most because of all the subjects of these cults I had met in these other documentaries. So many of them were outwardly searching so hard for something. They were just waiting for a guru to walk in front of them, and they were gonna. But the Nexium crew was like, I found that they were above average intelligence. Most of them, they were very kind of critical thinkers. That's what they were bound by. And then I got obsessed with like, well, what's this guy's magic spell on these very critically thinking, smart adults? And I think what I observed was he weaponized that against them. So when they would ask him a question, I started noticing it. Every time they asked him some big philosophical question, his response would be, well, what do you think? And they were so keen to impress him that they would come up with their very best explanation. And in doing that, they gave themselves the answer. And he just would sign off on it. Like he outsourced the actual dogma to them. He used their intelligence against them. And then back to your point of like people thinking they wouldn't be susceptible or they would be. It's like, well, here's this group that he figured out how to get them to indoctrinate themselves.
That's beautifully put. I completely agree. Because if you look at Keith Raniere, who presented himself as world's smartest man and world's most handsome man, it's hard to believe that. He also used to say that the rain didn't fall on him. Like he could be walking outside and it fell on other people, but not on him. So you'd think that an intelligent person wouldn't necessarily believe that, but maybe they. But what you're saying is he did attract, and I think they often do say this, that cult members are often highly intelligent. Intelligence does not protect you. It actually can make the web tighter and more effective because you're very good at convincing yourself and others. But you're pointing to Raniere. What he was really good at was using other people, turning them against themselves, turning their gifts against them.
Yeah.
Well, and in some ways, it's love bombing, like you said. He's allowing them to feel like, oh my God, I impressed him and he's the smartest person in the world. And so I must be like, I guess I must be my best version of myself here. I think there's a lot of that, like, oh my God, he's bringing out the best of me.
Yeah. And when you're watching those guys, they're on the Santa Monica Pier and they're kind of now they've been deprogrammed and disillusioned and they're just chatting. And then now they're recognizing some of the things they believed. And one of the guys just goes, yeah, he was a judo champ at 7. And they both are like, oh my God, how do we believe? What does it fucking mean, a 7-year-old judo champ?
It's like a spell is broken.
Yes, and the absurdity of these things they had heard now has come flooding out. And I imagine just the shame that induces, like, God,
Yeah.
So to continue that to today, I mean, it seems like the stakes are much smaller, but I argue that that's not the case, even though we're dealing with ordinary circumstances, yet they are always connected to the extraordinary. So that, it's very easy now to silo yourself in terms of what you're exposed to and to find news or information that just confirms your predilections. So I think that if you are finding that, or if you're not exposing yourself to challenging material or just things that don't agree with what you already think, that's something to be concerned about or something to kind of disrupt. These dynamics can feed on your altruism and also your repository 100%. Of unresolved emotions, and then just kind of crank them up to the point where you're not really paying attention.
Yeah.
So bringing down the temperature and in whatever way you can not contribute to polarization.
I hope everyone checks out The Instability of Truth, Brainwashing, Mind Control, and Hyperpersuasion, out March 25th. I'm a slow reader, and I was blasting through it. There's so much historical stuff in there. I love the history. I mean, there's just so many elements of the Korean War that I hadn't really known about or properly sympathized with. And
isn't that profound? It's such a forgotten war.
Oh, yeah.
It's so
no one talks about it.
Well, the sequel was so much more longer, heavily protested. It's like
cultural, more cultural.
Yeah, it's amazing. The whole experience of researching it was amazing to me.
All right, well, Rebecca, this was so fun. Thank you so much.
Fun. Yeah, thank you both.
Stay tuned to hear Miss Monica correct all the facts that were wrong. That's okay, though. We all make mistakes.
I screen grabbed something.
Tell me.
I know if I want you to find This is interesting. It cannot be about the Cold War.
Thank you.
So hopefully I didn't screen grab something about the Cold War.
I hope it's about fashion.
Okay. Fun to hear updates and the subject synthesized so well. For Monica's anxiety about death, you are on the right track with one of the ways to manage that response. I did CBT for anxiety about death, and the training is what you say. Look at probabilities and odds, focusing on stats and having self-compassion when the worries override the stats and likelihoods. Also, acceptance that we actually have so little control from an existential standpoint, and being truly zen about that from a place of gratitude for each day helps. It's tough to get to that place, though. It took me years. People like Monica and me are prone to rumination, aka sticky brain. It sucks so much and is tough to understand if you don't experience it. Similar to obsessional thinking. Monica's brain is micro-obsessing about death now and making her anxious. Just a perspective, since I know you don't suffer anxiety the same way.
Wow, that was nice.
That was a nice comment. Someone really took some time to try to help.
They did. Thank you. Sticky brain. I've never heard that.
That's what I'm going to start calling you now.
Icky.
Sticky brain. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Armchair Expert. I'm Dan Rather and joined by Sticky Brain.
I hate the way that
I could
sounds.
tell. Yeah, I had a hunch it was going to
Okay, I didn't
right.
like that. Is it rude for me to talk about this?
Oh, that's always a good start.
When somebody is reaching out to you a lot about hanging out, but you don't really know them well.
Yeah, right.
And so that's just not going to be your priority. How do you handle?
Well, and this might tip you into child ownership. I have much better built-in excuses than you do, and they're legit, which is I don't do anything. Every night of the week, I'm home with my kids eating dinner and then watching TV, right?
Yeah.
So I can just always go like, oh, yeah, I don't, which is true also. We get a babysitter like 6 times a year.
Right.
So I really make it kind of clear. I'm not social. And you really...
It's not true, though. Like, you go to breakfast with people. You make time for the people that you are prioritizing.
Yeah, so I can do a breakfast.
Yeah.
Once every month and a half, I'll do a dude's dinner, maybe 2 months. Yeah.
There are times that you prioritize it, but
that's like top tier best friend maintenance.
that's what I have time for.
Yes.
And I feel like I don't know, because I'll say like, oh, sometimes I'll say I can't for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, now, so that I got to put that on them. If I ask someone to hang out and they said I can't for the foreseeable future, I would go, okay, yeah, they don't want to hang out.
Yeah, but it's not, okay, and it's not personal. It's not like I don't want to hang out with this person specifically. It's I just only have time for the people that I barely that.
Right.
To
that you're closest to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to use that time for those people and not, it sounds mean. It really sounds mean. And I understand that it sounds mean, which is why I find this to be troublesome.
Right. Get a kid.
No, because
Okay. I thought you were going to, though.
I haven't decided.
Oh,
And
but after
Mindy,
you kind of were.
I was thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it. But, well, and then this is like part of the overall thing. As a parent, you can say that, right? Like you can say like, oh, I'm
with the kids every night.
I've been with the kids. I don't think I'll really be able to make it happen.
Yeah.
And
it's true, which is great.
Yeah, but my stuff is true too.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying.
No, I know.
It's an excuse and it's not an excuse. Like I really am home every night.
And you go to your meetings, you prioritize the things in your life.
Sure.
And so do I. And I guess that's like, it's the same thing, but if a single person says it, it sounds more like you're just saying you don't want to.
Yes.
And it seems more rude when really it's the same thing. It's like I'm prioritizing the things in my life that are important to me. And I don't think I can add anything new in right now.
Yes.
Same with young parents and old parents.
Like me.
I wasn't pointing to you.
Grandparent parents.
Yeah. If I am working, that's one category, right?
Yeah.
That's one category of things I have to do during the day.
Yeah.
Category 2 is being by myself.
Yeah.
I need some time to myself.
Yeah.
That leaves a small amount of time for social.
Yeah.
And there's two types of social. There is social with basically family, like friends who are basically family. And
Yeah.
you don't have to be or do anything but be yourself. Show up as you.
That's right. Come as you are.
Yeah,
BYOB.
that's right.
Yeah.
Then there's the other bucket of social, which is you have to be on a little bit because you don't know them
Yeah,
as
right.
well.
Yes.
You just have to be the
In
best
first
version
date
of
mode.
yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Let alone the category of dates, which we haven't even thrown in the mix.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So currently, my time is only
Your voice
for-
got high. Currently, my time is
apparently
counted for.
Because we also have to be on during this job quite a lot.
Yeah, many hours a week.
Yeah, and so I'm a little spent of that mode.
You want to be a dud. You want to be able to be
Yeah.
a dud.
and
yeah,
and
let
my,
other people-
my close friends allow that.
Yeah, they accept the dud version.
My fear is I'm telling people like I don't have time to do this. I'm sorry, basically. And then those people are gonna see me out.
Sure, with
I
Jess
go
and
out
Anna.
with my friends and be like, fuck you, you said you couldn't. And for me, what I want to say is like, that's a different category
Right.
that I do make time for because I need that restoratively.
I don't think any of these people are entitled to all that information. I think you just need to relieve yourself of
Should
the
I write
guilt.
write a note, make 80 copies and then pass it out?
Well, look, I do have a set thing in my notes that I
You do?
have. Yes, because I get asked very often to ask Kristen to do things.
You mean
Hey.
go out?
No.
Oh.
Hey, I've got this project Kristen would be great for. Hey, this charity event can Kristen host?
Sure.
And it's a very sincere, and it's true, which is I won't be a conduit of requests
Yeah.
to Kristen. She gets it all the time, and it's not going to come from me.
Right.
It's damaging to the relationship
Yeah.
for us to be not wanting to hear what each other has to say.
Sure.
So I took the time at some point to write out a very thoughtful
Wow.
version of that, but I don't want to have to do that every single time. So I have it in my notes, and I just copy and paste.
Oh my God. Do you want to read it?
So maybe, I wonder if I can find it now that I've said that. Not, and if you've received this, then you know.
See, this
That's okay,
is-
because it's legit, and I
Yeah.
stand by it. No, I can't find it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think the parents deal with it the most.
What do you mean?
Like my mom gets a lot of requests. I think Kristen's mom gets a lot of requests. And I get it because you're like, oh, a parent can ask their kid anything,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's true.
Like if I wanted Ace to do something, I'd be like, I just ask Charlie. He'll ask him.
Probably.
He's got no autonomy. He's got to listen to this
He's just a
request.
child.
I should ask Ace if he'll host a gala.
He'd be great.
He would if he danced.
Oh, yeah. He's such a good dancer.
He and Lincoln were so cute at Disneyland.
Oh.
It's so fun to watch. They really
Were
get
they
along, really.
dancing?
They weren't dancing. That's the problem. That's the annoying and attractive thing about Ace is he's the world's best dancer, but he won't.
I know. I
He
love
won't give it
that.
to you.
I get it.
Like if I were him, all I would do is dance.
I know. And then people would be like, can you stop?
I know. I would exploit it and wring it out for every bit of attention I could, and he doesn't. He's like, he was right to be trusted with that superpower.
Yeah.
Although he needs to lighten up the reins a little bit. I think like on Thanksgiving, he should do a dance performance for us.
No.
Once a year, he should put on. We sit through these other talent shows with the kids.
I
And
know.
the videos they make. We got an actual bona fide talent in the mix, and he's not showing
But
us.
he is, it's exactly correct because we are like, oh, I just wish he would dance for us.
Yeah.
That's what you want. You want people to want you bad.
Do you think it's weird? I think everyone does this, but do you think it's weird to look at a kid and go like, oh my God, he's going to do so well with the ladies? Like every time I'm around Ace, all I can think is like, God, this guy's every option's going to be available to him. Great dancer,
think-
sweetheart, gorgeous.
I do think that's your first instinct.
Everyone's or Dax's?
Dax's.
Okay, yeah.
It's not my first instinct.
It's not.
No. I think you put a lot of emphasis on
Romantic
dancing.
love. Oh, dancing.
I
Yeah.
mean, dancing's hot, but it's not like,
You don't think it's a silver bullet?
I don't.
I do.
I know
If you
do.
look good dancing,
Yeah.
it's not like you can just know the Running Man. If you look stupid doing the Running Man,
Yeah, but
that's
there's
a pass.
just so few opportunities in this world to dance. It's not like when we were in college and everyone was dancing every night.
no, if you're into dancing, you go out dancing and people see you. They see you.
But when you're
coming.
an adult, when
I see you, your dog, Charlie,
okay,
Rottweiler.
when I, as an adult, there are so many adults I know that I've never seen them dance. I have no idea what they look like dancing.
Well, you know what everyone in the pod looks like dancing.
No?
Sure, we've been to weddings. We've been to...
Yeah, but like nothing stands out at all.
Come on, roller skate parties.
Roller
You
skate
know
parties
Ryan's
isn't
a great dancer.
dancing.
You could name the
Ryan-
great dancers. Erica, great dancer. We know
She's
it.
a great, but I know that because she posts videos of her dancing in a dance class.
Yeah, and you've seen her.
But not like, she's not, that's
Matt and
not,
Laura's wedding.
it doesn't resonate with me
It's not a priority for you.
at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, like you say, Matt
Maybe
and Laura, I'm
'cause
like, I don't know what Laura looks like dancing.
Because you never were. That wasn't anything you were into personally. Like you
In
were never like,
college,
I'm a
we
great
danced
dancer.
we went out 5 times a week
Well, I think a
dancing.
woman that dances well is very sexy,
Interesting.
and it's a way to look cool.
Yeah.
You know, that's not for you.
It's
That's
not,
okay.
It's not for me.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not attracted to it, but it's not on my,
But what about Anderson .Paak?
Top
If she
5.
can't dance, then she can't. Ooh.
okay, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I think you
So-
can have sex if you can't dance.
Right. So that's a lie that he said that.
Yeah, but I do think someone who's very in touch with their body and knows how to move their body, it's a good signal. Let me just ask you this. There's 2 guys. They're identical twin brothers.
Okay.
They look the same. They have the same personality.
The exact same personality.
Yes. One of them is dancing like a dad.
Okay.
And the other one is dancing very well.
Okay, listen, that's not a good.
It's a perfect one.
No, it's not because you
This
made
is a
them the
control
same.
group.
You made
Yes.
them the same.
The only variable is they're dancing.
Obviously,
So which one do you want to
Oh
get
my
in
God.
bed with?
no, that's not how you play this game. You have to give me different sets of good things. And one of them is dancing on one person.
Yeah.
The other has other stuff, and I have to pick. If obviously they're the exact same and they're dancing, I'm obviously going to pick that.
Great, because you would say it's more attractive than not.
Yes, I already
Okay.
said that. I said
okay.
it is.
I thought
I'm
it was
not-
like a who cares?
No, you're not listening.
Okay, I'm trying.
I said it's not that it's not attractive. It is attractive.
Okay.
But it's not on my list. It's not like
Top
top
3.
5 things.
Great.
So yes, of course, if top 5 things are met with 2 people and they're the same person and they look exactly the same and have the exact same personality,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no to good dancing.
Yeah, okay.
But if it's like guy A,
And really quick,
Mm-hmm.
when you look at them and you're like, I wonder who's better in bed, would you not assume that the guy that's coordinated and on rhythm is better in bed?
if they have the exact same
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Anyways, Ace is a spectacular dancer. Lincoln and he were having so much fun together.
That's fun.
And we were gay dads, as you know,
Great.
at Disneyland. But we're not as built this trip. We're not as big.
You are.
Well, just keep it
This
neutral.
whole episode's of disaster. God. Oh my God.
I'm a little bigger than Charlie at the moment, which is very rare. First
Oh,
time in
Emma.
our whole friendship, I'm a little bigger than him. So I think what people assumed changed. 'Cause remember last time he was an Adonis and they thought I must be an architect. Do you remember this whole thing?
Only vaguely.
They're like, oh, the one man's much older than his husband.
Right.
But he looks kind of cool. He looks artistic. He's got tattoos. He must be an architect. This is what they
Now,
thought.
you think that when people look at tattoos, they think artsy.
Yeah, I think if you're seeing someone who is heavily tattooed and successful,
Well, how do they know that?
Because we have a guide.
Oh,
I mean, that's a giveaway,
okay.
right?
Yeah. But
I'm just
maybe,
being honest.
but maybe your hot husband.
Okay, great.
is
So
rich.
yes, we're just going with like most people think. So you see an older dude with a younger man, they have a guy.
Got it. Okay. And he has tattoos.
90+% of people are going to go, oh, the older dude's got some money.
Okay.
Oh, wow, he's made some money, but he's also heavily tattooed. So he's either owns a restaurant.
Uh-huh.
You go through a...
This is very LA.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, if you were in the Midwest and I saw a dude heavily tattooed and I knew he was rich, I'd go, oh, he owns a tool and die shop. Like this is...
Exactly.
What environment could he make a ton of money but also look like a fucking junkie?
Scary guy.
Yes. Okay, so that was last year's scenario that we both thought was most likely. People definitely thought I was an architect.
Okay.
And this was my boy toy.
Okay.
But now it's a little bigger this year. So now I'm not sure what they think. I didn't have as clear of a conclusion of what people thought. Other than people, again, were very excited and happy that we had a family. That seems to be consistent.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Families are great.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fact? Did you notice that during this whole time we've been talking, I've picked at my fingernail
Yeah.
and now I have this piece and I've been putting it places.
Different places
Have
in
you
hopes that you'll
noticed?
remember it. I see you grab your phone, which is disheartening. So I'm like, oh, she's checking her phone in the middle of this story about me being an architect.
I wasn't.
And now you're, yeah. You should eat it. Just eat it.
No, I've
Just
never
eat it.
eaten
Oh,
it.
you dropped it between your legs.
Yeah, I was worried about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there it is. One of our guests will be sitting there and be like, God, I just keep stabbing my butt
See,
cheek.
some people will be like so disgusted by what just happened.
Yeah. Well, remember, you would put your feet on the couch and people would really lose
they
their
wouldn't
marbles.
like it.
Yeah.
And I am not that grossed out by nails. And I guess I'm not that grossed out by hair. I guess I'm like
You're pretty
very chill.
You are. You're afraid of death, but everything before then, you're kind of fine with.
Yeah. Okay.
Pooty, nails.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
I'm
You're
proud
chill.
of myself
yeah,
for
you're
that.
cool. You're cool.
You're cool.
You're cool.
Can't dance, but you're cool.
Can't dance to save your life, but if you shave that side, you'll pull it off.
I was a good dancer.
Well, no one will ever know.
I danced well with this one person. We danced a lot together. Okay. Oh, I pulled this up to show you something, and now I have forgotten. Whew, I'm all over well, we just did Armchair Anonymous. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Our brain gets a little jammy. That's an Easter egg.
That's an Easter egg for...
No, don't say that.
Okay.
Okay.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
This is for Rebecca Lemov. And this was interesting because this was brainwashing and scary.
Do you think you've been brainwashed?
By you. Oh, you tried. You tried to brainwash me into thinking dancing was the best quality.
I just think it's a very hot, attractive quality.
It's hot and it's
It
attractive.
turns things sexual. I guess that's really what I'm saying.
Oh.
It breaks through. Like, you could meet a dude and you'd be like, oh, he's good, but I'm in the friend zone. You could see him dance and be like, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely an en route.
You're right about that.
Thank you.
But it's not a bad dancer if I like them
Yeah, that's fine.
is not a deterrent. But I
Correct.
guess you're right. A good dancer
Could be a
can be
game
an
changer.
additive.
Yeah, it could change the dynamic of everything.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like if
That's been my experience. Which is, I think some girls were like, whatever, I don't know, he's loud. And then on the dance floor, like, oh, this is interesting. He is
loud
very louder.
as a dancer.
Even louder.
Okay. Population decline. You said California's population is declining and everyone else's is on the rise. Now I'm going to read you the list here.
Okay.
This is most decline all the way up to most growth.
Okay.
Okay? So the most...
You can do like the top 10 and bottom 10?
Sure. I'm not going to count.
Okay.
I'm going to read them all.
All 50 states.
Yep. Okay. So the most decline, New York.
They're hemorrhaging people.
Yeah. 0.91% population change downward.
0.19?
91.
Oh, 9.1. Almost 10% of the state left? Or
No,
9.1 out of 100,000 people? leave or something?
0.91%
Oh, 0.91.
Yeah,
Sorry.
change in population.
Okay, so almost fell a percent.
Okay, New York, so that's the worst. Then Illinois. Yikes.
Sorry,
Because
Rob.
Rob left.
Yeah, that's true.
You're
makes it
part
look
of
good.
it.
Yeah, it
You're
makes
part
it-
of it. New York, Illinois, Louisiana, West Virginia, Hawaii, Oregon, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, California. So already there's a lot worse off than us. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Then Maryland, New Mexico, Massachusetts, Alaska, New Jersey, Ohio, Kansas, Michigan, Vermont, Connecticut, Iowa, Minnesota.
All losing people.
Fuck. Oh, Michigan is the last loser.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Last of the losers.
Last of the losers is Michigan.
Which is first place in losers.
That's right.
Yeah.
0.03%.
Oh, that's nothing.
Population decline.
That could be a miscount.
Now, it wasn't. This is on World Population Review.
Okay.
Very trusted brand.
I'm always on there.
Now we're going to go neutral up. Okay? So Vermont has 0.1% growth
Okay.
in population
Could be a
change.
statistical error. Go ahead.
Connecticut, Iowa, Minnesota, Kentucky, Missouri, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Indiana, Virginia, Wyoming, Alabama, Colorado, New Hampshire, Washington, Maine, Oklahoma, Nevada, Georgia, ding, 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 Tennessee, ding, 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 Utah, North Carolina, Arizona, Arkansas, Delaware, Montana, South Dakota, Texas, South Carolina, Idaho, Florida.
Man, I would have definitely thought Tennessee and Texas were higher on that list.
Tennessee's pretty high.
What's the percentage change?
It's the 12th,
But what percentage?
1.19%.
1.1. So that's higher than the biggest loser.
Yeah. The
biggest loser is
most,
0.9.
Florida is 1.91% population growth.
2% a year.
Almost.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just, as a Californian, people are worse off than us.
Yeah.
And I just want that to be known.
Okay. You want more people to come, or you want to stay the same, or you want people to leave?
Oh, I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay.
Okay. Infanticide among Inuits. Until recently, certain Eskimo groups were reported to practice female infanticide in the belief that the time spent suckling a girl would delay the mother's next opportunity to bear a son, males being preferred to females because of their future role as providers in a hunting economy. From sex ratios and census data, rates of female infanticide of up to 66% for some groups have been inferred, leading some
66%.
leading some ethnographers to conclude that these groups were headed for extinction. Eskimo beliefs regarding the effects of infanticide on fertility, however, are in accord with the results of research on the relation of fertility and lactation. The cessation of lactation following infanticide would significantly shorten the expected interval until the next birth. Given this fact and available field data regarding the parameters of Eskimo population growth, the present computer simulation indicates that Eskimo populations could sustain a rate of 30% female infanticide and still survive.
You reading that just reminded me I have something much better. That is what I screen grabbed to tell you.
Okay, tell
Can
me.
I interrupt this portion
Yeah,
of the
that was
fact
it.
check? That was it?
I mean, it's sad.
Okay, this is really something. And I probably need to send these to Rob right now so he can get them up on the TV.
Oh, great.
Okay, so for the listener who can't see this, it's a picture of a very white woman on the left and a very, very black woman on the right. 36-year-old German model who now identifies as black plans to move to Africa after taking melatonin injections.
No.
She and her partner are now preparing for the move, with the influencer stating, "My husband and I had already planned to emigrate a few years ago, but then the pandemic hit. It hasn't been easy choosing where in Africa, but we currently have Kenya and Namibia on our short list." Now scroll through the other pictures there, Rob.
Oh, my God.
This is, wait till you see the one in her tribe outfit.
Oh, are we
She's
sure
dressed
it's her?
like-
It is her.
It is her. And she's dressed like she's a Maasai or something. This is nuts. Do you think this will be like, will people sign
real?
on to this? Yeah, so there's a peptide you can take.
No.
Bodybuilders use it to be darker so they don't have to use as much self-tanner. And apparently she's just on elephant dose of it. And she is black and
She's
identifies
very
as
dark
black.
skin.
You can't
No.
identify as black.
No.
Right?
No.
Do you think is there any conceivable way in the future this will be a very protected group?
No, because this isn't fair to black in a very marginalized group.
Yes.
I mean, unless okay, look, here's how this is the only way it could happen.
Okay.
If the black community was like, great.
We love it.
Then,
Send us your whites.
Then
Send us your previous whites.
I guess we can't have a problem with it.
I'm more okay with her just dyeing herself black
No, why?
over saying I identify as black.
Oh.
My issue is the identify as black.
Exactly.
I don't really care if you take too many peptides.
Okay, what did she say? Hold on, let's go back real quick.
Okay. She said,
who now identifies as black. Oh,
has announced plans to move to Africa after injecting melatonin, a synthetic hormone to darken her skin. But yeah, I guess
have a
people
question.
probably, there's no way people who can't see this are imagining her skin is as dark as it is. And she is as white as it gets on the left. This is nuts, right? This is like something you used to see in the old days in the Enquirer. This happened, remember, with the woman that was somehow became president of the NAACP, and she said she identified as black.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It is called melanotin. It is peptide hormone stimulating. Like,
Go ahead.
I mean, no. But then is it okay to make me white? I mean, I don't want to anymore.
Yeah.
But like,
I don't care.
This then gets into that where, to me, that's way worse. What she's doing is way worse than the other way around.
Yes, because I would say yes, she also has ginormous augmented breasts, which is interesting. If you've not experienced racism your entire life, to say you identify as black
exactly
is, how could you?
It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
I just think it's white entitlement to the nth degree.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Like as Joy would say, the caucasity.
Yeah.
The caucasity to say you identify as black.
Although,
I can't believe I haven't sent this to.
Yeah, you have to
I
send
gotta send all this right now.
You know what's kind of, obviously I think this is atrocious. This is a no. This is bad. But what you just said, like if you are a white person, you can't say you identify as black because you've never experienced what it's like to be a black person in this country. I will say she's not going to be a black person in this country. She's going to be a black person in Africa where racism is going to be not look like.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That was Kirby's kind of what she illuminated for us was like, it's different in England because people chose to come there. That's just, the whole dynamic is completely different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I guess if you were, I mean, now we're trying to pick maybe what's the best place to do this in.
I mean, this is insane.
Yeah.
It's insane to do. It's entitled.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I guess also who cares? A little bit of who cares?
It's
like she
not
wants
fair.
it. She's on some weird journey.
Yeah.
She's not hurting anyone. I guess I shouldn't care.
Well, I care on behalf of a marginalized group that has experienced a lot of
Yeah, but to your
hardship and
point,
racism.
in Africa, they're not marginalized. So.
Well, yeah. But
And she's from Germany.
whatever. I hate
Complicates
her.
everything. Okay. You can resume your
Also,
facts.
I don't, as someone with brown skin, God, I mean, this is like, what are we doing?
What
are we doing with peptides?
What if a white person, me,
Okay.
and I said, I'm Indian.
Yeah.
I want to identify as Indian, and I took this peptide.
Like,
What would you,
I would just
what
be
would
like,
your action?
but you're not. Like,
But
you
I
can't-
identify as,
Stop.
ever since I went to India, I realize I'm Indian.
Okay, I guess I'd say, what about India? What makes you feel Indian?
I like the food.
Okay, so you like Indian food.
And it feels like I was designed to eat that food. It made me think, that's weird. Why does this food sit so right? It's like I've evolved to eat this food.
Oh, I don't.
And then I realized, oh my God, I know what's going on. I'm from Bombay,
Okay, it's actually Mumbai.
but not when I left. It was still Bombay.
Because you didn't leave, because you are never from.
Yeah, I was there. Clearly, I was there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
so you think what do you think happened? Do you think that you were born there?
I was assigned the wrong ethnicity at birth. I was assigned Caucasoid, but I'm Indian.
And were you born there?
I'm reincarnated. I'm a Buddhist too.
Okay.
I have a lot.
You can
I'm
be
Siddhartha.
You can be Buddhist.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
But I was an Indian Buddhist, and I was reincarnated in this stupid Caucasoid body.
I see.
I'm Indian, and the food tastes so good to me.
So you might
And I'm of a high caste, I found out.
from
Because, of course, I am.
Okay. So you might have been an Indian Buddhist, and
Yeah.
you have been reincarnated. I can't deny that, but you have been reincarnated as a American white person.
The oppressor? No. Maybe you want to be the oppressor,
No.
but I don't.
I am the oppressor. I dropped my
Your nail again?
Yeah.
I can't believe you even found it.
I know.
I thought it was lost to the...
I feel complicated about melatonin or melanotin.
Yeah.
Okay. And I feel we were talking about this yesterday. Like peptides are a lot of the rage
Yeah.
right now in LA.
Yeah.
And there is the real chance that you can just change your whole being with them.
Yeah.
I am very skeptical of it. And now with this makes me like even more.
But this, this is the most extreme case imaginable.
But it's a real peptide.
I love peptides.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a little reminiscent of your initial
Ozempic
issue, which is like, why not? Like, I don't,
But why
who
not?
cares?
No, I don't think it's fair for you to decide tomorrow to take melatonin, and then become my color. Like, I don't think that's...
Well, that's a very extreme version of peptides. But do I deserve to take a peptide that elevates my HGH levels naturally? Well, it's not naturally. I'm taking a peptide.
Nothing's
but
natural.
my
about these.
thyroid, or my pituitary gland's making the HGH. It's not exogenous HGH. What's the problem?
Yeah, I just think all of this is a really, really, really intense obsession with
feeling good?
anti-aging and optimization.
Yeah.
That I find overall just like not you. This overall conversation about it obsessive and very the substance.
Yeah, but let's take me as an example.
Okay.
Like, I have a crazy workout regimen and a diet regimen, and I'm going to take anything that doesn't have bad side effects that's going to help me in that pursuit.
In the pursuit of what?
Being as physically fit as I possibly can.
Okay.
And I can afford to,
Yeah.
right? Now, is it fair or not that I can and other people? I think that's a side conversation. But just assume everyone has access to everything.
Yep.
And I'm 50. I just was at Coda and I rode a motorcycle all day long on the racetrack.
Yeah.
And I felt great and I was able to do that. And primarily because of my fitness. Mm-hmm. A lot of the 50-year-old dudes are not doing the sessions like I can do.
Yeah.
So my life is really good because I can still pursue my hobbies with vigor, and it makes my life better. And that is solely an outcome of how I've taken care of my body. And this is yet another tool like eating well is, or like that protein is, or vitamins are. It's just another thing. It's a very arbitrary line between should I take vitamin D or take a peptide?
Well, there is a difference in that a lot of these peptides aren't like approved. I looked on the website yesterday of one, and they all say not for human use.
Yeah, so that I go through a doctor.
Right.
So, yes, without a prescription, you're going to get on a website and it's going to say for animal use or something.
Yeah.
I have no claim on that. But I'm talking about going to a doctor and having the human version of a peptide prescribed to you.
I guess if a doctor is prescribing it.
And I get blood panels every 2.5-3 months
sure you're
that monitors
healthy.
everything.
Look, I don't think it's like amoral. I think it's, I think society has become really obsessed with anti-aging.
You think more than?
Yeah, this is extra. I mean, to me, injecting yourself with a massive concoction of things that you're tweaking to make you look 30 for the rest of your life. To me, is literally the substance, like that movie.
Yeah, well, but the substance was robbing your futures, your current self. So there was a heavy price to pay.
There was a price to pay.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing the price to pay other than the financial.
We don't know.
Price. Well, no, anything I'm on has been in the market and has been used on HIV patients for 35, 40 years.
I know, but you don't have HIV.
No.
So you don't know technically. There's a reason these things aren't FDA approved. They have not been tested for long enough.
No, all of these are FDA approved if you get a prescription. And they're also a category that can be used in lab testing, which is what you're seeing on the website. But no, all of any peptide I'm on from a doctor has been FDA approved and used in medical trials. One in this case I'm referencing is HIV patients.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine. Obviously, I have no say in what other people do, but it sprouts all these interesting questions because I don't want to.
Yeah.
But then I think, if literally everyone else is doing this,
you feel pressured to do it.
It's not even that I feel pressured. It's like I'm gonna look so old. Or I'm going to look so, even though I'm actually aging naturally, I'm going to be left behind.
Well, you're aging naturally, but with Botox and injections.
Yeah.
It's an identical argument for someone who's like looking at you and going like, well, fuck, do I have to get Botox because everyone's doing it and I don't want to get Botox, but Monica's getting it and now I have to. So it's like, that's the same argument as this peptide thing to me.
It is. I mean, that's why I did that. Yeah. Because over time, it's like, oh my God, everyone is doing this. Mm-hmm. And I guess if everyone has a face that looks wrinkle-free and I'm the only one walking around with wrinkles, that's going to look insane now when it used to look normal.
Well, this is an interesting side thing that will take too long. But I more think about, yes, I've talked about this with Eric and stuff. It's like, well, everyone's going to be on tirzepatide or some GLP-1 at some point. It's going to be over the counter.
Yeah.
Let's just say everyone's going to be on it. It's 4 cents. Everyone's skinny. Let's just say everyone's skinny.
I know.
But what I think is like, well, in a world where everyone's skinny, people that aren't skinny will be very interesting and exciting. So if no one has wrinkles, it's interesting to think of just if everything's neutralized.
But I guess that's my whole, I'm like, we're becoming one person thing.
Yeah.
And that is boring.
But we're not.
But we kind of are. It's like if everyone can get the exact same coloring. Yeah. If you can change your features, if you can make yourself not age, if you can be all one body weight, like that is so boring, really, I think, for me anyway.
Or you might, silver lining, it might actually be, well, then all you'd be deciding on is personality. Everything else has been neutralized.
I guess. I mean,
doesn't that sound like utopia a little bit?
No. Yeah, sure. I
don't know. It's just, it's interesting. It's fascinating. If mine was, I don't think I'd look any hotter. I don't think my face looks better. There's like nothing I'm taking to look better.
But there are peptides like that. There are
I want them.
I know.
What are they? Let me ask my doctor if I can be on those. But yeah, I'm up for everything that makes me feel better and doesn't have a big cost associated with it.
You know what's wild is the other day, a old video popped up on Instagram of, do you remember from The Hills, Heidi and Spencer?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And do you remember she got so much
surgery?
Plastic surgery.
Oh, she did. I didn't know that, but
it was a huge thing. She got a ton of plastic surgery. They did this episode where she was basically talking to her mom and her sister.
Right.
Her mom and her sister were bawling.
Uh-huh.
And she was explaining everything she did. And she was like talking kind of weird. And like, it was sad. Like it was presented as, oh my God, cautionary tale.
Yes.
And this popped up. And I was like, that is not how I remember it. She looks kind of like so many people now.
Oh, nowadays.
Like her in quotes, like crazy things she did.
This is kind of standard.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I will say when I'm in Beverly Hills, I will pass like 6 or 7 women in a row that have identical shaped faces because the filler ends up making every face.
And they
like
get nose jobs that their nose is the same and lip injections that make their lips all the same. And yeah.
I just don't care.
am going to get chin filler again.
Right. Yeah. I just don't care.
About what?
That people do that stuff. It doesn't bother me.
I don't care individually. Like, I don't care that person in Beverly Hills is doing it. But societally, I start to like pull back and I think, oh my God, we really are shifting into this other realm. And that is where I start
I just think people have always been doing everything they could. So they wore perfume when that was invented, and they got hairbrushes to keep their hair pretty, and they got combs, and they got hairstyles, and everything that was ever at your disposal. Yeah. People have been pursuing looking the best they can.
Yeah.
And there's more and more products in the mix.
Yeah.
But I do think people have been trying to look their very best for, I don't think that's new.
I haven't brushed my hair in like 4 days, so.
Well, we pick what things. I know me too. My jeans are dirty, but I need to work out.
Anyway, that's all very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
All right. Love you.